7 young men, one cramped practice room in Seoul, no money, no connections, no plan B. In 2013, Big Hit Entertainment was one step away from bankruptcy. Their debut act, a hip-hop group nobody believed in, was about to make their first public appearance. Nobody in the Korean music industry gave them a chance. 12 years later, BTS had generated over $5 billion for the South Korean economy, sold out stadiums on 6 continents, and become the most streamed group on Spotify in history. But, in 2022, at the exact moment they should have been celebrating, everything nearly fell apart. This is how BTS conquered the world, and then nearly destroyed themselves. To understand BTS, you have to understand where they came from. K-pop in the early 2010s was already a machine. SM Entertainment, YG Entertainment, JYP Entertainment, the big three, controlled everything. They manufactured idols like assembly lines, perfect looks, perfect choreography, carefully managed personalities, no rough edges allowed. Big Hit Entertainment was not the big three. It was a struggling mid-tier agency run by a man named Bang Si-hyuk, known in the industry as Hitman Bang. He had written hits for other agencies, but his own label was bleeding money. When he signed a group of teenage boys from across South Korea, some from middle-class families, some from poverty, one who had already been training at another company the industry didn't even notice. RM, the leader, was just 16, a quiet, bookish kid from Ilsan who had taught himself English by watching the TV show Friends. Jin had been scouted on the street. Suga came from Daegu, with almost nothing, working part-time jobs to survive while he trained. J-Hope was a street dancer from Gwangju. Jimin V and Jungkook, the youngest at just 15, rounded out a group that felt raw, unpolished, and completely unlike anything the K-pop machine was producing. Their debut in June 2013 went almost unnoticed. The song was called No More Dream. It was aggressive, confrontational. It told Korean teenagers to stop blindly chasing grades and parental approval and start asking what they actually wanted from life. In a culture built on conformity, it was practically a provocation. It didn't chart, it didn't trend. Big Hit was still broke. But something was happening quietly, in comment sections, on fan forums, in the DMs of teenagers across Asia who felt like nobody in music had ever spoken directly to them before. BTS wasn't just performing, they were writing their own lyrics. Documenting their lives on social media before that was a K-pop strategy, showing the exhaustion, the self-doubt, the pressure. They were being, remarkably dangerously for a K-pop act, real. The next 3 years were brutal. BTS trained for 12 to 18 hours a day. They shared a single dorm. They had almost no budget for music videos. There were reports of members considering quitting. The industry still ignored them. But their fan base, who would eventually call themselves ARMY, was growing. Not just in Korea, in Southeast Asia, in Brazil, in the United States. In 2015 something shifted. Their Guesuio, the most beautiful moment in life, series connected with young people on a level that felt less like a music release and more like a shared emotional experience. The albums explored youth, anxiety, fleeting happiness, and the fear of growing up. It was a concept K-pop had never attempted at this scale. By 2016, they were selling out arenas in Asia. By 2017, they became the first K-pop act to win a Billboard Music Award, beating out Justin Bieber for top social artist. The American music industry laughed it off as an internet stunt, a fandom voting anomaly. They were wrong. In 2018, BTS released Love Yourself Tear, and it debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, the first Korean-language album ever to do so. Then RM stood at the United Nations General Assembly and delivered a speech on self-love and mental health that was watched over 100 million times. Then they filled Wembley Stadium, Rose Bowl, MetLife Arena, sold out in minutes. Every time, the numbers became almost impossible to comprehend. Their 2019 world tour grossed over $170 million. Single album releases crashed Spotify servers. The South Korean government gave them a special exemption from mandatory military service, a privilege extended to Olympic gold medalists and classical musicians, because their cultural and economic contribution was considered equivalent to national service. For a group that had debuted in a bankrupt agency with a borrowed practice room, it was almost fictional. And then came 2022. The cracks had been forming for years. The members had spoken openly about burnout, about the psychological weight of being the most scrutinized musical act on earth. Every word, every movement, every relationship, real or rumored, watched, dissected and weaponized by media and obsessive fans alike. In June 2022, they posted a video that stunned their fan base into silence. Sitting together at a dinner table, each member spoke. Some cried. RM said they had lost their identity, that the pandemic had forced them to stop touring, the one thing that had always recharged them, and left them facing questions they didn't know how to answer. Who were they without the stage? What did BTS mean if they couldn't perform? Then came the announcement. BTS was going on hiatus. Each member would pursue solo work. They were not disbanding, they were careful about that word, but they were stepping back. From the group, from the machine, from each other. ARMY went into shock. Financial markets reacted. Shares in Big Hit's parent company HYBE dropped 28% in a single day, wiping billions off the company's valuation. Then the military service question, which had been circling for years, finally landed. South Korea's mandatory military service applies to all men. The exemption BTS had received was temporary, and public opinion in Korea had shifted. Many felt the exemption was unfair. One by one, the members enlisted. Jin went first, in December 2022. Then, J-Hope, Suga, RM. The others followed through 2023 and 2024. For a group whose entire commercial model depended on their presence, activity, and constant content, it was the longest silence in their history. But BTS had always been underestimated. The solo careers were not the desperate side projects of a group in collapse. They were revelations. RM released introspective, art-influenced albums. Suga, performing as August D, sold out world tours as a solo act. Jungkook became the first Korean solo artist to perform at the FIFA World Cup. Jimin had the first solo #1 single by a Korean artist on the Billboard Hot 100. They weren't fragmenting, they were expanding. And through it all, the hiatuses, the military service, the silence, ARMY held. The fanbase that BTS had built through radical honesty and genuine connection did not dissolve. It waited. The full group reunion is expected in 2025, when the last members complete their military service. The music industry, the same one that laughed at a Billboard award in 2017, is watching. Here is what the story of BTS actually is. It is not a story about a K-pop machine producing perfect idols. It is a story about 7 people who refused to be that, who insisted on writing their own words, showing their own pain, building a connection with an audience that the industry said shouldn't exist. They were too honest for K-pop, too Korean for America, too emotional for the mainstream, and those were exactly the things that made them impossible to ignore. The empire nearly destroyed itself in 2022. Not because of failure, but because of the unsustainable weight of its own success. But if history is any guide, the next chapter of BTS will be the most interesting one yet. Every empire has a story. Now you know theirs. This is the Founder Files, Beyond the Brand. If this episode hit different, subscribe. New episode every Saturday. I'll see you next week.